Hello, hello, and welcome to Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I am your host, Amanda, and my amazing co-host is...
Hello, I'm Megan.
So we are your messy, imperfect homeschool mom friends. If you are tired of feeling like you can't live up to the shiny influencers filling your social media feeds with their impeccably clean homes and Pinterest perfect looks while they bake homemade goldfish crackers, so are we. And you should join the club, right? We are your people.
Exactly. There's a large and growing community of secular, progressive homeschoolers who believe in far out concepts like equality and science. But it can often be hard to see ourselves represented in the larger landscape of homeschoolers. So that's where we come in. Welcome, and we are so glad you're here.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be talking about worldschooling. Now, if you're not familiar with worldschooling, give us a minute and we'll get you up to speed. If you are familiar and you're thinking, yo, I can barely afford to go across town right now, and you wanted to discuss like far off exotic places, like just wait, please. Like, please don't leave us, okay? We'll be discussing how you can world school near and far, and also offering some tips on world schooling on a budget, because we like budget.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. All right. But before we dive in, let's do our weekly recap. So I think things are ramping up on the out of control level on your end, but hopefully soon it'll smooth out a little. What's going on?
Soon. I have a countdown to eating pizza with my best friend in Florida, and that's the thing that has me like, I got this. I called her the other day. She's been my best friend for like forever. And I called her the other day crying in the car. And I was like, I just need you to tell me that this is all going to work. And she's like, it's all going to work. It's going to be okay. And so I was like, okay, so that's my goal, right? Is like, today's Thursday. So either a week from today or a week from tomorrow, we're going out for pizza, and I just get to sit and like melt after all of this. So yeah, I mean, it's Thursday. Our moving truck comes on Tuesday. We drive to Florida on Wednesday, put a bunch of stuff in storage. And then the following week, we are flying out of the country. I've gotten some things taken care of, which is exciting. Last week, I talked about the hoops that I had to jump through to get my kids' ADHD meds into Europe. I got my paperwork stamped by the Polish government. So hip, hip, hooray.
Very nice.
That feels good, right? I'm working on one last paper that needs to happen for the service dog. And then she has a veterinary appointment Monday that has to be done like within a certain window.
Yeah.
That'll be done. So like, I'm chipping away at it. It's happening. It's coming along. The house is chaos and, but it's all good. I think the kids are pretty excited. And I went to a thing. It's not a recommended resource yet. I haven't even had a chance to tell you because it was just this morning. But I went to a webinar this morning for an online school that gets brought up in world schooling communities a lot, called Clonlara. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. Have you heard of that? It's in Maine.
I think I have. Yeah.
So I'm still not entirely sure about it. I liked the presentation. It was professional and it made sense and all that, but I'm trying to figure out some of the logistics of homeschooling in other countries. And apparently some people are using that as kind of like an umbrella school to stay away from the government of whatever that country is. And I don't say that in like a tinfoil hat sort of sense. It's like the governments there are much more like you have to test in Italian or something to homeschool. Like, that's going to be tough, like for my kid to pass a high school level exam in Italian, their first year in Italy or wherever, we decide to homeschool would be pretty tough. And so some people are apparently using this school as kind of like an intermediary and saying like, oh, my kid is enrolled in school. So I'm trying to figure out the logistics of how that works, but things are coming along. It's happening. So it's good. Yeah, I'm getting there.
Yeah. And for anyone who's listening and is like, oh, what is she talking about? That's really only if you're going to like take up residency in another country. Right. And so like if you're an American and you're going to be traveling around a lot and you're not changing your residency,
you're good.
Yeah, you're totally fine. And it doesn't matter as much, but it can matter more, especially if you're an American who is taking up residency in various places or staying longer than just a standard tourist visa. You might need a US based umbrella school.
Exactly, which is our plan. So thank you for clarifying that, because in my head all that made sense. But we are talking world schooling today, so people will be like, "What are you talking about? My kids have to take tests in Italian, right?" So no, so we're trying to find kind of a home base in Europe for world schooling. because my kids are neurodivergent and enjoy a home base. They like their homebodies. They're introverts. They want to have like a little bit of a space at home, even if it's just like a tiny little landing pad that we can have. But I have to figure out what country that happens in based upon homeschool laws and a few other factors. So we're working on it. It's coming together. How about you,
Nice.
Amanda? How's your week?
Yeah, it's fine. Like the normal level of annoyance and frustration, right? Yeah, life is pretty good. We're actually after we wrap up podcasting, we're heading up to LA. We're going to do Universal Studios, so that should be fun. We're heading to Universal tomorrow. I've never been, and neither has my kiddo. My husband has been. He lived in California a lot longer than we have, so he's been to a lot of these kinds of things. But yeah, so it should be fun to check that out and have a little getaway, not really getaway, staycation-y kind of thing, and like that advantage of homeschooling, like go before the weekend, take a day off midweek and head up there. So yeah, that's really what we've got going on and looking forward to.
Are you a thrill ride person? I feel like with some of your medical stuff, that's like not really going to be for you.
Yeah, so it is a bummer. I used to really love thrill rides, and I used to love roller coasters, and I could do them even before. So I used to be like the primary roller coaster rider, and sometimes my husband and I would fight over who got to go on the roller coaster ride with the kiddo, because I wanted to go every time and he wanted to be able to go occasionally. And so yeah, but now with the long COVID, one of the symptoms that I have with that is some really intense neurological overwhelm, stimulation stuff. So unfortunately, pretty much all of the rides are out, which definitely changes the equation a bit, but hopefully we'll still have fun. And I got a new cane that has a seat, so I can, while I'm standing in line or wherever we are, I can pop it out and sit down. So like I would make a joke about being old, but I don't feel like I'm old. But your life has changed when you're like, hey, they had Prime Days and I got a great deal on a cane with a seat. So yeah.
Exactly. There you go. Well, if it makes you feel any better, my daughter and I were like absolute roller coaster junkies. And then once I hit about 40, I couldn't do them anymore anyway. Like I started getting motion sick in a way that I never was before. And we went to Carowinds at one time in North Carolina. And it's kind of like a great adventure type park with just roller coaster. I legitimately thought I was going to throw up on one, and I've never had that. And I was like, I am going to embarrass myself on this thing. Like, I mean, she and I used to do single rider lines and just get on and on and on. Like we'd get off and just get right back in the loop and go for like the whole day. And all of a sudden I hit an age where I couldn't do that anymore. So you might have aged out of roller coasters naturally. I'm not sure. Like maybe that doesn't happen to everybody. I don't know. But for me, I don't know if it was hormones or age or whatever, but all of a sudden my butt, like even swings at the park, sometimes I get a little like, and I never had that before. So maybe you would have aged out anyway. I don't know. You could use that as like a solace in some way, maybe,
Yeah.
So you'll bring a good book. You can get in some bench time.
Yeah, that's it. Always a book on my phone. So. All right, so let's go ahead and get back to our topic for the day. So we're talking world schooling. Let's start with the basics. What is world schooling? Like most terms in the homeschooling and even parenting world, right? There isn't one specific definition, but rather kind of this range of approaches that all circle around a central concept.
Mm-hmm. So we looked up some actual definitions of what other people call world schooling, and then we'll kind of talk about how we world school. So according to Prisma, which is an online school option, world schooling is a type of homeschooling that involves full-time or part-time travel away from the family's home country. World schooling families may be nomads traveling from place to place, or they may have a home base in one country and travel periodically. So it's focused on a lot of international travel, that particular example.
Yeah, it is. Which, I mean, I think that's kind of one of those things. If you live in a smaller country, then that makes more sense. If you're in a small country, like when we were living in Belgium, 2 hours in any direction and you're in another country. So it makes sense to say, like, well, that's world schooling. Whereas in the United States, you can fly 5 hours and you're still within the United States. So that definitely a little can vary there, right? Another example, progressiveschooling.com has a broader definition of world schooling. They say it's when you world school, you are learning through travel, culture, and experiences.
Like that a little bit broader for sure.
Mhm.
So, for our purposes today, we will define world schooling as learning through travel. We're going to try to make it broad so that it's applicable to a whole bunch of people. That could mean trekking to the far ends of the earth or visiting all of the state parks in your home state. So, you can start off with smaller trips that are within your comfort zone and or budget, which I think is helpful, right? I feel like um, if you're listening to this and, Amanda's going to be like, I went to Madagascar solo with my kid, and people are going to be like, like thinking of like all these like doomsday worst case scenarios, right? You don't have to start there, right? You can start with an overnight in a state park or something. So let's get into it, which will be great.
Yeah, no, for sure. And before we say anything else, I just want to give a word of warning, right? So, um, there's a spectrum when it comes to homeschooling, much like anything else, right? If you're unschooling, right, there's a wide range of ways to do it. It's the same with world schooling. And so, if you're going to go join groups, just be aware of that. If a group is specifically world schooling only, they might expect you to be on the nomad end of things and to not have a residency somewhere or to not still own a home in a country or to have, like a home base kind of thing. Whereas, some others that might be talking about, like homeschooling, unschooling, world schooling, road schooling, combo kind of things, they're going to be far more open to the idea that world schooling can be a part-time situation or, that you just incorporate it as part of your homeschooling. So just kind of keep that in mind if you decide to listen to this and then I want to learn more about that. I'm going to go hit up Facebook. Different groups will have different rules around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's kick off with the value of travel, right? Why does world schooling seem to be such a common topic within the homeschooling community, right? Why does
Mhm.
it keep coming up in our circles? And you know, what are kids getting from travel? So, um I mean, everything under we're going to have different experiences this too, right? As far as like,
Mhm.
you know, um, obviously we've been different places and things like that, but also like there's a question that we'll chat about today about like, what counts as school when you're traveling, and we'll, I'm sure, look at that quite differently, right? But I think it's not unreasonable to say that your kiddos can learn history and geography and culture and language and all of that through travel.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's totally true. And, I think you also can't underestimate the value of leaving your bubble, right? Exactly where you are. And you said, as you brought up, so many people are like, well, what, why is world schooling talked about all of the time? And I think that a huge part of that is in the groups that I'm in, the parenting groups, I see so many parents who one of the biggest things they struggle with is wanting to be able to take vacations or take trips, whether it's a family vacation outside of summer break or it's a need or a desire to go home to see their extended family wherever that may be. Maybe they need to travel out of the country for X, Y, or Z. And the public schools being just completely inflexible about
Hmm.
allowing travel outside of those specific school holidays and school breaks, which is very expensive, right? If you are only
Yes.
traveling during school breaks, you're spending a huge premium to do that travel. And so I think that there are a decent number of people who are coming to alternative education models in part because they want to be able to travel more and experience more. And it's hard to do in a standard brick and mortar school.
Hmm. We talked way back in our very first episode, and we've talked about it again in subsequent episodes about your why for homeschooling. Why do you want to homeschool? Because then you can make decisions that align with your overall goal. Otherwise, it can be really hard to kind of meander through your journey. But if you've always got this, here's my reason why I'm homeschooling, and then I can take every decision that I'm faced with, or most decisions. I mean, sometimes you're just going to make a decision on the fly without having a huge analysis of it, but your larger decisions, you can look at and evaluate them against that. Why does this decision, does this step get me towards my overall goal? One of my things that's been on my why statement from the beginning has been that I wanted my kids to experience the world and see the world and not read about the world in a book. That
Mhm.
it was my goal for them to stand in the place where history occurred, as opposed to just kind of imagine it. And I'm a history nerd, so that's why I use that example. But there's something very powerful about, standing, in front of the Reichstag in Germany, or, whatever it might be, and knowing what has happened and the significance of that building throughout history. So for us,
Yeah,
that's
no.
always been huge.
I totally agree with that. For us, it's a little bit different in that we do live in Southern California now, and we're very fortunate to live here, right? You're right on the beach and you've got great weather and all of these kinds of things. And the political climate is what we like and enjoy. We're a progressive podcast. It's not hard to imagine why I would enjoy living in California. Um, but that said, I'm originally from the Midwest, and I think it's really important for my kiddo to spend several weeks of the year. We spend probably closer to 2 months of the year in the Midwest with extended family there, and, going to farms and corn mazes and walking around the small neighborhoods and doing more small town things and experiencing, more Midwest life. Uh, but also, my husband is not from the United States. And so, our kid is multiracial, multi-ethnic, and making sure that we are trying to incorporate that as much as possible. And also, we live in a condo in a city, right? Like in Southern California. There's a lot of privilege that's wrapped up in that. And we work really hard. We try really hard to make sure that we are seeing and experiencing a lot of things, and that we keep our circle really diverse, and that we, embrace a lot of stuff. But that does not change the fact that growing up in a condo in the city in California is not what the vast majority of people are experiencing and living. And
Mm-hmm.
without actually making a point of going outside of that and taking the time, not just a weekend away, not just a camping trip, but actually taking the time to go stay somewhere else and really see and experience, like, wow, this is what it's like to not have easy access to clean water. Wow, this is what it's like to not, just to have air conditioning whenever you want it, or not everyone is, those kinds of experiences were really, really important for me in educating for life, which, ends up kind of playing into that why for why we homeschool. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
we move on. Next topic.
I completely agree, though. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to dig into our conversation a little bit more about how travel fits into education and how we're documenting those things, and how, because that's a huge thing. Like, what do I do about school when we travel and stuff like that? So we definitely need to get to that, because that's always a big question, especially if you live in a state that's counting days or hours. I think Missouri counts hours in this super wonky way. And but was it Missouri? Do you know? Is it? I think it's Missouri. I forget. Anyway, somebody will tell us in the comments. But first, we want to take a moment to thank our amazing sponsor, Recess. They are a new platform for homeschoolers. One of my kids is on there and is loving it. Recess's mission is to help homeschoolers make friends and develop hard skills. They have a really interesting approach inspired by Montessori and the MIT Media Lab.
So the way their program works is they meet their kids in their favorite games. And then within these games, they offer them harder and harder challenges to turn their interests into real life skills, right? Everything they do is centered around kids being social together and working together. Every class comes with a moderated chat so that your kids can talk to their friends outside of dedicated class time.
Mm-hmm. They have a mission to understand every kid. So the teachers get together. They have a small team of dedicated teachers, and they get together to really try and assess what each child needs, better understand their needs, and then help them grow. It's totally different from other class marketplaces or classes online that we've tried. There's more of a community feel over at Recess.
For sure. So, if helping your kids make friends and giving them a child led education sounds interesting, definitely check out recess.gg. That's RECESS.gg. Parents from all kinds of amazing institutions, from Harvard and MIT to Apple and more, are using their platform. So, the quality is definitely up there. And really, we're all about just looking for quality resources that help our kids, that fit our kids well. And we think Recess might be an option for you. So definitely check it out and let us know what you think. And thanks to Recess for sponsoring this podcast.
Yes, thank you. All right, back to world schooling.
Yes. So, as you mentioned, we'll probably have a little bit different take on some of these things, right? So, the first thing, what counts, right? Does travel, quote unquote, count as school? Do you need to bring school with you when you travel? I'm sure we do quite different things, right? So, in our family, if we are doing a family vacation for like a week or two, or sometimes we'll do like a 2 or 3 week trip, but most of it is over what would be considered like a holiday break. Like we almost always do something at Christmas and New Year's because my husband's company shuts down from during that time. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't make the kid do any kind of schoolwork between Christmas and New Year anyway. And so maybe we're on a trip somewhere. And during that time, we do history tours and we learn and we're experiencing the culture in some other country. Like, yeah, I count that as schooling. And that pure travel, it does count as school. But if we switch in our family, when we switch to a longer trip that's during what would more typically be considered school year, we definitely bring a fair amount of school with us. We do quite a bit of our regular school stuff while we're traveling. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not doing other things that are there, right? We are doing tours and we're learning about things and we're practicing the language and learning about the culture and, trying to volunteer when appropriate and those kinds of things. And I do consider that all education, but we still bring our traditional curriculum with us to an extent. I'm going to guess that's not necessarily how you have done your previous world schooling.
So when the kids were younger, no, we just took off and went, right? We didn't bring anything per se. I will say that we are a fan of doing things ahead of time that will enrich the experience when we get there. So, and we'll be doing that for this upcoming trip. We are going to Poland. We're joining this World Schooling Hub. And so we will be going to Oscar Schindler's factory and things like that. So, I've talked to the kids and they've never seen Schindler's List. We're going to watch it. My youngest is hypersensitive. And so we've kind of talked through that and we've agreed, if he needs to excuse himself, or I've seen it multiple times, so I know what's happening. I can give him a heads up or tell him to close his eyes, leave the room. We can pause, we can take a break, whatever. And he's welcome just to excuse himself as well if he wants to. So he knows that. So we'll do that. We usually read books leading up to trips and things like that to prepare us a little bit more so that when we get there, we can marry what we already know with the actual experience. So we'll do things like that. So that was when the kids were younger and still now. But when they were younger, that was it. Once we got on the trip, we were on the trip, right? All of our learning was organic and experiential. Now my kids have some more commitments. So yesterday, for example, I needed to text Liam's math tutor. He does tutoring in the States. I think it's at 5:00 in the afternoon. So that'll be like 11. Liam's a lifetime insomniac. So he takes the sleeping pill. I'm like, his pill will have long kicked in by then. He cannot take math at 11 p.m. So I'm working on getting that shifted earlier while we're in a different time zone and stuff like that. So he will keep his math class that he does. He does 6 hours of math online a week. My daughter is finishing up the school semester, and so she'll have class, and her class will be from like 2 to 6 a.m., but it's not for a terribly long period of time. It's just 2 days a week. So she's like, I'll do it. It's no big deal. So she'll do that. So we are kind of keeping some of those things, but we're slimming it down, right? And so it'll be a little bit less. So I'm curious on your end, Amanda, when you're documenting, because you're with charter school in California, like, can you document your trip? As like, I know I've included trips on transcripts and things like that, and that counts as learning. Like, I can create a course out of travel. Are you able to do that in California, or maybe you don't even need to because you already have everything else and then the trip is like icing on top? How does that work for you?
Yeah, it's a combination, right? Especially if it's a shorter trip, it's easy to include it. And so one of the things that I almost always do if we're going somewhere is I head over to Teachers Pay Teachers and I get a unit study for the country that we're going to. The unit study, I try to always make sure it has some information on geography, history, like political climate, maybe food, or something more exciting like that, and then maybe like top landmarks sort of thing, and we will work through that while we're there. Usually that's the kind of thing like we'll do when we're on flights, especially if we're taking a flight within country, or like we have a boat transfer or something like that. Yes, it's fun to look around, but you can only look around for so long at new things like that, right? And so you just pull it out, kind of read through it, work through it together. And I will use those as well to help, as maybe the things that I hand in to the teacher. I will have my kiddo keep some form of a travel journal, or take pictures and explain things. And our charter teacher will almost always ask him about the trip or something he learned. Um, and so we do have that. And in large part, that's because I will say, while I say that we travel and we continue the curriculum that we use when we're at home, I do not. We travel light. We try to travel carry on only, even when we're doing these month or 2 month long trips. And so carry on only, I cannot bring my entire 12 shelf IKEA bookcase that has all of our homeschool supplies on it. Like, that's not how we're traveling. So I don't have nearly as many actual like workbooks and worksheets. I might pull out specific ones that I want him to work on. But when we're traveling, for the most part, he is working on specific things that I know we can easily travel with us, or he's taking extra online classes. He's staying up on anything that's online. So maybe he's using Raz Kids and he's Beast Academy and, things like that that are mostly online. And then the actual paper stuff is these, unit studies that I printed off ahead of time so that I know for sure he's filling something out that I can turn into our charter school, because we do have to turn those things in.
Mm-hmm.
And, for me, that does constitute a full education for him as far as what we need to do and provide to our charter school. And I think for the vast majority of people, right, that's the case. We're not talking about going on a 3-week vacation and only hanging out on the beach every day. Like, that's not world schooling. That's
Right.
a different type of trip and vacation. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to be aware of the fact, like, that's not world schooling. And we're not encouraging you to like
Put that on your transcript. Yeah.
only hang out on the beach for 3 weeks and be like, but we learned about beach. Maybe for a week, but yeah, a whole month of it might be pushing the limits if you didn't at least download some unit studies or watch some videos and documentaries about the ocean or something. I don't know, erosion, or somehow wrap it all up in there.
I'm picturing some sort of like half credit elective on how to make frozen drinks or something, like chemistry. Does that count as chemistry?
Yeah. So, chemical reactions, yeah. And
so yeah, that's pushing it. Or like music theory while you're sitting there, when you're at resorts and they have people doing like Zumba by the pool. International music theory. Okay.
Yeah.
It's pushing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really pushing it, even for the unschooler in the mix. It's pushing it. But yeah. If you're doing, historical sites, museums, they usually have a park film. A lot of times you can get things at the gift shop on the way out, as far as maybe, a timeline book or something. Sometimes even there's just historical coloring books and things like that can help you dig in. So there's so much that you can do that's tangible and reinforces all of that.
There is. And I would say, and I think as homeschooling parents, we're less likely to do this, but don't underestimate your kids. It makes me so sad when we go on a walking tour or a hop on, hop off bus tour, and the parents have drugged the kids along and the kids sit there like on their phones, gaming or whatever else while the parents are enjoying the history tour. Like they are written to be engaging, right? It's an audio tour. You put the headphones in, you listen. It's meant to be funny. It has jokes. It's kind of a story type thing. Like, expect your kid to participate in that. They might not get as much out of it as you do. And, you'll definitely want to have talks about things, but it's also a great way to be like, well, what was the thing that most interested you on this tour? Like, let's go there, let's go check that out more. Like, but, don't just assume that your kids aren't going to be interested. So like they have to tag along, but they'll do something else. Like, I think most of the time kids can rise to the occasion and join in.
Heck yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think often gets overlooked or underappreciated is the amount of SEL, which is social emotional learning skills that happen when you're traveling.
Yes.
So, whether that's interacting with adults who have a thicker accent or trying to do it in a different language, ordering for themselves, whether that's going to the beach and asking the kids who are playing football or whatever they call it, wherever you are, if you can join in, and then working to make that work. It could even just be playing with other kids at the hotel pool, like figuring that out and navigating that, especially when there's a language barrier, which will happen a lot if you're doing world schooling outside of your home country. Those are huge social emotional learning skills. Kids spend a lot of time on that in school these days. Like, use it, count it.
I don't think they do in South Carolina. I think that might be a California thing. I'm not sure we're doing basic academics in South Carolina in school, so I'm not sure that we're going further beyond that.
I bet you would be surprised. I bet you would be surprised with what the school counselor is attempting to do. It might not be going very well. It might not be achieving what we're hoping it's achieving, but I bet you'd be surprised.
Hopefully it's baked in there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, we started off our discussion about saying, the economy right now is struggling. People are struggling. We totally get that. We're not immune to that fact. It's gotten difficult for a lot of people, but it doesn't have to cost a fortune. I don't think either of us spend what anyone thinks we spend on travel. We've just figured out ways to make things work and to kind of do things. So Amanda brought up traveling off season. Definitely, right? Aside from the cost, it's also just less crowded, right? The other day I went to Target on a weekend and I was like, ugh, this is why I don't come here on a weekend, right? But I needed something. It's terrible. I do not like going anywhere in season. There's a trade-off to it. We went to homeschool days at Colonial Williamsburg a million years ago when my kids were really small, and there's a trade-off. It's not terribly busy because it's off season. It's super discounted because it's off season and it's homeschool days. There were some things that were closed because it was off season. They were doing repairs to certain buildings and stuff like that. But then at the same time, I have a kid who's an artist. We went to this shop where the gentleman, so if you're not familiar with Colonial Williamsburg, they're craftsmen, they're craftspeople. There's a tailor shop, there's a weaving shop, there's a joiner, there's all these people doing their colonial era skills that are mostly not on display anymore. And they're dressed in period piece clothing and they answer questions and all of that. So we went to this one place and there was a gentleman there making paint the way paint would have been made in the 1700s. And she was just standing there mesmerized, and it was roped off. You weren't supposed to be back there, but because it was off season, it was really quiet. He said, come. He said, Mom, do you care if she gets paint on her? This won't come out. I was like, go get paint all over you. I do not care. Right. I don't, the clothes can become play clothes. No problem. And so, it was a give and take because there were some things that were closed because it was off season, but they also got more hands-on because it was off season and they were able to do things. So traveling off season is huge, which we love.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is off season doesn't even have to be like true off season. You don't have to go somewhere during like hurricane season for it to be much cheaper. You can do shoulder seasons. There's a reason shoulder seasons are hugely popular, and it's usually right when the kids go back to school, right? As soon as they're back in brick and mortar schools, the weather's usually still really nice. It's kind of like that perfect time where you can get deals and discounts. And there are lots of websites, tons and tons of places to research, like best places to go for off season, or, like I have time in October. Where should I go in October? What's a great place to go with good deals in October? Like, use the resources at your disposal.
Mm-hmm. For sure. We've talked before about reciprocal passes too. If you can get a pass for the botanical gardens or something like that, it will carry over usually to 100 other places in the country. So when you get somewhere, you don't necessarily also then have to spend entry fees galore and things. Be very conscious of what your access gets you through whatever memberships you already have. When I lived in Florida, we had the children's museum that got us into a bunch of other children's museums. So things like that. There are also homeschool discounts. So I know Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge is kind of the mecca on the East Coast of places to go if you want to see fall leaves and bears and things like that. There's a bunch of stuff there that offers homeschool discounts that you can get into. And it's kind of a common topic of conversation in this general region, because you can get into all of the Ripley's things and a bunch of other stuff. They have a Ripley's World Record Museum, Guinness World Records. It was super cool. And it's discounted because you're a homeschooler. So there's little ways out there to make things a whole lot less expensive.
Well, yeah. And, the thing with museums is some museums are really expensive and some are very affordable.
Mm-hmm.
But also, you can look at visitor centers. I think those so often get overlooked, but a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, visitor centers have great displays of historically accurate information. And, in a previous episode, we joked about kids hoarding brochures and maps, but there's a lot to be learned from a brochure and a map, and these are great places for them to pick things up and to spark their curiosity. And, you get home and you hit Google and you use Google Maps to look at things, and you can do more research. And if they really want to dive in on something, you can hit up Teachers Pay Teachers. There's pretty much guaranteed to be a unit study on there about whatever you're interested in, right? There are lots of ways to build entire educational experiences around free or really affordable things.
Mm-hmm. One of the favorite museums that my kids have ever been to was a result of a brochure at a rest stop. The Idaho Potato Museum was not on our thing. The kids saw it. We stopped to go to the bathroom as soon as we crossed into Idaho. They had a thing. It's been years, and they're still talking about the Idaho Potato Museum. And it's the size of my house, right? It's not a big museum. They had a thing on the brochure where you can get free potatoes. They were dehydrated potatoes, in I think they were the matchstick style potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a whole program that they had called Taters for Out of Staters. And that they were sold. I mean, you give them a wordplay like that, and the kids were like, Taters for Out of Staters, we have to go. And we went, we've been back. That's how much they loved it. Like, we actually went back to it, and we don't live anywhere near there, but we were within the vicinity, and the kids were like, we have to go. So yeah, those brochures can be powerful. And as you would expect from the Idaho Potato Museum, it really wasn't a terribly expensive adventure, but it stuck with them. They loved it. One of them got a potato t-shirt from the gift shop. It was so memorable. So
yeah, right. And that's one of the advantages of world schooling more slowly. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, like being open to things that you weren't necessarily expecting to do or see, it can make such a big difference in what you actually take away from your travels. So we were kind of talking, and Meagan mentioned it earlier, that thing you can do local, you can do small things, you can do easy trips around, and you can make those long or short. It can be a long weekend if that's what you need to start with, or a couple days midweek because you're trying to avoid all the other crowds at Yosemite or wherever you're going, right? You can also use points. So I'm really big on travel hacking. I use a lot of points and miles stuff. If that's something that you're interested in knowing more about, you can reach out to us. We have a pre-recorded thing that we can share with you, and there's some other resources we're happy to provide you. And then beyond that, like, you can come join our Patreon and come and join us for any of our live Q&A discussions. I'm always happy to talk points and travel hacking kind of stuff to help out. But there are there are ways, right? There are entire communities that do amazing things for significantly less than you would think. So Megan threw out that I did Madagascar for a month with my kiddo, and it wasn't quite. We were there for 3 weeks, and we did 1 week in Ethiopia. Um, and you know, when I told people that, people assumed that we were spending tens of thousands of dollars. And it's a fair assumption because the flight from Southern California to Madagascar with a stopover for a week in Ethiopia, the flight alone is 6 or 7 grand a person for the most part. I was not paying that, right? Like I used miles. We used our United miles on that. And so I had to pay taxes. It was like $340 a person for the airline taxes. Um, and then hotels are not expensive in Madagascar. I mean, yes, of course, you can stay at a really posh shishi place, and it might cost $100, maybe $200 a night if you're really pushing your luck. But yeah, it did not need to be that way, and I wasn't looking for that experience, right? Like we were there to try to get to know a little bit more local, and so yeah, we mixed it up and we stayed at different places and things like that, and I did want a level of safety that
Right.
did require a more Western style hotel and things like that. But it was still, little bungalows, and we had to pay extra for the air conditioning, and we ate a lot of the local food. And like, I was desperate for a fresh salad by the time we came back, like just those kinds of things. There are differences, but there are totally ways to use miles for your hotels, for apartments, to get cash back, right? Like I book a lot of things with Viator, but I have, I use the Capital One portal, and there's this whole trick to making sure that you get 20% cash back on anything you book through Viator using the Capital One portal. Like I have no idea why you'd pay full price on Viator. Like that just doesn't make sense. That's a silly waste of money. Like there are ways to utilize these things and maximize them. And it can really make a big difference in how much everything costs.
Yeah, I agree. I am also, and I don't know that camping is totally your jam, Amanda, but we're huge camping people. We do quite like camping. I will say, kind of like in the beginning of our episode where we talked about the spectrum of unschooling and the spectrum of world schooling. There's a spectrum of camping. I'm a camper van camper, but camping on any level is amazing in our book. We love it. We love a good communal shower. We love a good ranger program in a national park, all that kind of stuff. We are hostel people too. I booked a couple of hostels this week, actually. One that we've stayed at before in London. It's right next to St. Paul's, and it's adorable. You can get a private room in a hostel with your kids. The thing that I enjoy about hostels is if you're in a place where you want to experience culture and meet new people and all that kind of stuff, hostels have a very communal feel to them for the most part. They are all different. Some are going to be more communal than others. And you need to read the rules because some of them do not allow kids under 18. 100%. They have a bit of a party vibe sometimes, and you probably wouldn't want to be there anyway with your kids. So you need to read the rules.
So we haven't done a lot of hostels. And for the most part, that's just because of where we've been traveling and kind of the things that we have going on. And you're right, camping is not our jam. We're not camping. But
I do enjoy, yeah, like in a hostel, there's usually a common area, and that's where people are at night. People are playing games, people are reading books, people are doing things, and we enjoy that, right? Some of the ones that we've stayed at, the only place that has Wi-Fi is the common area, and so you'll end up there if you want to use the Wi-Fi, and it works because you end up meeting people from all over the world and talking to people and all of that, and we enjoy that. So, and it's certainly, if you're in a big city that's known for being quite expensive, it is certainly less expensive than that. It's going to be completely no frills, but that's okay. Like for us, that works. I'd rather have a no frills experience than no experience. So we enjoy hostel life. It's fun for us. So
well, yeah, and that's that's the thing. It also depends on where you're going and how long you're staying and what you're looking for, right? Like for us, we're doing Europe in the new year. We're going to be in Italy. We're renting a little cottage for $1,500 a month while we're there. And, that's great for us and it works for us. But we can get a little cottage because it's two of us, maybe three of us, depending. And so that's okay. And they're usually willing to work with that. But by the time you start looking at houses, maybe you are better off with a hostel. Whereas for us, a hostel in Italy would probably be much more expensive for 2 months than it is for our little cottage, and
Right.
Just some of those kinds of things. Right. And also, hostels are usually not super disability friendly. So if you have that
That's true.
going in, make sure you look into that and double check that. Most of the hostels that I've stayed in have quite a lot of stairs without elevators, and the bathrooms are not necessarily set up real well. And so, keep those kinds of things in mind if you're traveling and that is something that matters to you or something you need to take into consideration.
We talked about camping, but I hadn't mentioned national park passes. So there's talk about the fourth grade, every kid in a park pass. I think that's a thing that Obama put through a number of years ago. Every fourth grader in the United States can get a national park pass. It's good for a year, and it counts for everybody in the family. So, or it's technically everybody in the car. So you could put whoever you want to in the car and they'll all get in for free. I will tell you, if I'm going to be honest, they never really check that your kid is in fourth grade. So you could have a fourth grader for a couple of years if you really wanted to, like third, fourth, fifth. You could really kind of bridge that. I mean, in homeschooling, we always talk about the fact that the grade is a bit arbitrary because kids are working at asynchronous levels. So as long as your kid is doing some sort of fourth grade work, I'd say go for it. So you can do that. The other thing is there's an accessibility pass through the National Park Service that is for what they classify as a permanent disability. And there's a list of what qualifies as a permanent disability. You can go to a ranger center. You need a note from a doctor about your permanent disability. And then you will get an access pass that lets you into the park, your carload of people into the park for free forever. The nice thing about the access pass that the others don't have is that it's 50% off camping. So if you are camping, and the campsites are no more than $20 a night usually, but still it brings it from 20 to 10. If you're doing a whole week, you just saved a decent amount of money there. So that's pretty good as well. I will say autism is one of their classified quote unquote permanent disabilities. So one of my kiddos has an access pass. It's awesome. We say thank you to him for our 50% off camping every time we stay. But it's pretty awesome. So see what's available. Your state park might have student things and et cetera as well. So it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, no, for sure. So another thing that, like, a bigger general topic is the idea that, like, there are tons of life skills that traveling and world schooling provide. And those life skills may or may not be tied directly to something they would learn in school. So, an example of a life school that's directly tied to what they learn in school is math. A lot of people don't think about that, but if you are traveling to somewhere that does not use the US dollar, you have to do a lot of converting and a lot of calculating different types of numbers, especially when you go to a country where, maybe one US dollar is worth 27,000 of their local currency, right? So suddenly you're doing a lot of ratios and percentages and decimal points and big numbers and things like that. Don't downplay that. Don't discount that. That is a lot of mental gymnastics that is really good in a lot of different ways, right? But also a life skill. You have to be able to pay for stuff no matter where you go.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
And even, learning other technology. Like, I know when we used to live in Europe, everything was cash. And so we got used to that. You had to always have cash. And sometimes you could use your bank card. A lot of places wouldn't take it. A lot of places wouldn't take credit cards. And then when we went a couple years ago, we actually had to go to our European bank and sort some things out. And before we went, everyone was like, oh, everything's Apple Pay now. After the pandemic, everything is Apple Pay. And I was like, okay, like, we haven't used Apple Pay at all. It wasn't necessary yet. We weren't doing much, and it's just not that common. And so I had to set up Apple Pay and figure out how to get it to work, because that was everything wanted my phone to pay. And I was, I don't understand how this works. I don't, but learning new things. eSIMs are another thing that is a tech thing that if you're going to do world schooling, you'll have to learn about, and they're much, much more common outside of the United States. I know there are people who listen to our podcast outside of the United States, but the vast majority of the people who listen are Americans. And it is important to know that the world outside of the United States operates very differently. And
Mm-hmm.
to remember to be open to that and willing to learn new ways of doing all kinds of things, which I mean, that in and of itself, right? That flexibility and willingness to learn and adapt in a specific scenario is a huge life skill.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
one of the things that's important that kids get from travel too, I know my kids have it and it gives me a lot more comfort with them having more freedom, is kind of a spidey sense of safety. When they've traveled to places where the rules of safety are a little bit different, or the threats that they may face to their safety are a little bit different, they just become more aware of what's going on around them, I feel like, and they have a better sense of listening to their intuition, telling them when something's a little bit askew, knowing what to do, knowing how to ask for help. I feel like all of that comes as a result of having been in those situations, which is so tremendous. I mean, we still have people who are getting scammed by fake Nigerian princes in this world, right? Like, you have to be in a position to be able to know when things are legitimate, when they're not legitimate, when something is valid, when it's not valid. And I think a huge part of that comes from having those experiences and having to make those decisions. So I think street smarts and personal safety really come with those experiences as well. And that's something that's, I won't say more important than textbook learning, but if you only have textbook learning and you're lacking those, you're going to have some problems in life, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to go very well. So having those experiences where those can really be put to the test becomes really important, I think.
Well, yeah. And, learning from a young age how to travel in a way that doesn't make you an obvious target is so beneficial as you get older and they go out on their own, right? We have been talking in other podcasts and in this month's book club about giving your kids their independence, and yet the fact that they don't always make sound choices until well into their 20s because their brain is still developing and growing, right? You can teach these foundational skills of, don't walk around with a big old map in front of you or a guidebook or, any other obvious, hey, I'm a tourist and I don't know what I'm doing. Come take advantage of me. And if you teach those things when they're younger and they are just used to traveling in that way, when they go on their first trip with their friends or a camp or spring break or, whatever the case may be, they're going to be less likely to put themselves in those kinds of situations because it'll be second nature. It'll be how they know to travel.
Exactly. Yeah.
For sure.
And when they do that, they'll have a better understanding of budgeting, how to manage their trip funds, what they can say yes to, how they have to prioritize their trip wish list and things like that as well. Because if we involve them in that when they're younger, it'll carry through when they're a little bit older, which is awesome.
No, that's true. I think, especially as Americans, a lot of times we struggle to create budgets and include the kids in the financial decisions and talks about the budgeting and what that looks like, especially the younger kids. But I think trips are a great example of doing that and being able to kind of outline, hey, this is how much money we have for the week. Maybe you're not including them in the costs of the travel to get there or the room or that kind of thing, but more of a general, we have this kind of money and, going to the grocery store versus going to the market and how you're spending your money and going to the market versus eating out and the types of restaurants that you're going to and whether you're eating at a local restaurant or the chain pizza place, and how you're spending that money and how you're making those decisions and whether or not you're doing the really cool boat tour or you're booking with a local person and financially what that all looks like. There's so many opportunities for really great life skills, budgeting skills, social responsibility skills, just so many things that you can do there. But also it's a great way to strengthen those family bonds in like that most fundamental, like respect and conversation, right? Like getting buy-in, that idea of, a family, it's not a 100% democracy, right? Like the parents are they still have more pull. For the most part, they're the ones bringing in most of the money. But you know, those family bonds of respect and all of that really are huge, and that's a super important life skill, foundational for just healthy relationships later on in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my kids are quite close. They're close in age too, and I don't know if that entirely helps. I'm an only child, so sibling dynamic is a little bit foreign to me. But I did have them close together intentionally, hoping that they would turn out to be close. I That's not a guarantee, but I kind of hoped it would work out that way. Um, and they're close, they're friends for the most part. They get along. Of course, they have their moments like anybody else, but for the most part, they're great. Especially my boys, they have similar interests and they spend a lot of time together. And I attribute a huge amount of that to the fact that they spent all summer traipsing around in a camper van with very limited electricity, pretty much no Wi-Fi for months. And they would sit at night and play card games together, and they would joke around, and they have all these little inside jokes. I mean, my oldest is absolutely hilarious. And the oven mitt from our camper van, his name became Sir Oven Midius. And Sir Evan Midius has a whole life. I mean, he's really lived. He's got a whole backstory and the whole thing, you know. And it's hilarious because we got rid of the camper van, but we kept Sir Evan Midius, and I don't really know what to do with him now. It feels wrong to throw him out because he's become a road trip member, but at the same time, he's kind of ratty looking. So, like, can I bronze an oven mitt? Like, what do I do with him now? You know. But yeah, I totally think that tossing your kids together in these quirky situations, they will end up with jokes and connections and bonds that they don't necessarily have otherwise. And so it really kind of, I think, meshes family units together in a fun way when travel takes place. So you mentioned earlier, Amanda, the concept of slow travel, and I didn't even have a chance to talk to you about this before. But would you classify yourself as a slow traveler, or do you love a jam-packed itinerary?
We do both. I'm it's part of my personality. I've never been great about liking people to be able to figure out who I am. I don't really want to be like neatly in a box. And so, I'm really big on the fact that there are very few wrong ways to travel. Like, I love everything from a cruise to an all-inclusive to a month, slowly backpacking and just making it work. So yeah, we do both. We'll definitely do some city trips that are jam packed, and we'll definitely do things where we go, like, for example, our 3 weeks in Madagascar, I had like a solid 4 things that I definitely wanted to do in those 3 weeks. And they were things that could be done in like a half a day, and then the rest of it was like, well, we'll just, we'll see. And I think there's a lot to be said for both, right? That I don't think one is superior to the other. And you'll hear plenty of people who disagree with that. There'll be plenty of people who, especially if you're talking about world schooling, who will say that you have to slow travel, right? You don't get any value out of it. You don't learn how people live if you don't slow travel. And there's some truth to that. But there are a lot of things to see, right? There are a lot of things to see and do and enjoy and experience. And if you can only go to Athens for 3 days because you're somewhere and you randomly hop on Skyscanner and say, hey, if I want to go anywhere, there's a way to search. Like, I'll go anywhere tomorrow. And it's like, hey, you can go for $75 round trip to Athens for 3 days if you're willing to leave tomorrow at this time. You're like, okay, sure. Okay, so go and do it. Make it a jam-packed, crazy. We went to Athens and we saw all these things, and we only were able to do it in 3 days, but we had this amazing opportunity on the cheap. Don't pass it up because, like, well, I'm not going to actually really learn how they live in Athens. It won't be slow. So yeah, I think both are fine. How do you think you travel? I have an idea of what I think, but how do you think maybe so far, and what are you hoping to do in the future?
So it depends on the trip. So to be honest, kind of like what you said, when we're doing state and national park, we are 100% slow travelers. I mean, we have never finished a hike. I don't think ever, because we find my kids are big fans of finding a body of water. And as soon as, if we're on a trail and they find a body of water and they go to skip stones or wet their feet or whatever, we're done. We're done for the day. They'll be in that body of water until it's time to leave. And in the beginning, it was like, oh, but we're, doing this trail and supposedly the top is beautiful. I let all of that go. So it's so funny because people will say, we love Zion National Park. It's one of our favorites. It's gotten way too crowded, but other than that, it's amazing. And, people will say, oh, have you done this trail? No. Have you done this trail? No. I've done the river. I've done the river a whole bunch, So yeah, we're pretty slow in that way. We like to get distracted. We are open to kind of shifting gears. I will say sometimes we go to New York for a quick, we can get to New York for $25, $30 on Spirit, which I know everybody has their thoughts about Spirit, but we've always gotten there and back in one piece without any major issues. As long as you don't bring a bag or ask for a specific seat or whatever, it's truly 25 or $30 to go to New York. It's just, it is what it is. So we'll go up, sometimes for an overnight. There's a hostel in New York City. There's a hostel in Chelsea that's super cheap. If I don't have enough points to cover a New York City hotel, I could do that. And then sometimes we'll cram stuff in because it's like there's shopping we want to do, there's eating we want to do, there's friends we want to see, maybe we want to see a show. So sometimes we'll cram that in. But generally speaking, we have full down days where we just sit at a cafe and play Monopoly or read a book or something. And we kind of prefer that. Does that surprise you? Did you think because my brain is like a mad pinball machine that we don't do that?
I didn't think that for the most part you did down days. I can't imagine you actually achieving a down day, but I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, we are at our best when we're not overbooked in everything. We do not like to be overscheduled. We don't like to have something every day. We don't like to be out for super long days. We like to get out. We like to do our thing, and then we're done. Then we like to chill, and we like to noodle, and we like to laugh and read a book and play a game and be done. So yeah, that's generally how we rock.
Yeah. In our family, if my husband travels with us, he has a really hard time. He does not take a down day well at all. And he feels like if he's made the effort to get on a plane and go somewhere, like it should be go, go, go. And so, and with my health issues now, especially, that's really, really challenging for me. And so I will say that's a big part of why we don't travel together a lot. We will do our small family vacations together, and I can power through for a week at a time if I need to. But on a much longer trip, he would be bored out of his mind with us. And that's okay. I mean, if homeschooling has taught you anything, it's about understanding the people in your family and finding what works for you. And if it works for you to go, go, go all of the time for all of your family, then go, go, go for all of the time for all of your family. And if that doesn't work for you, that's okay. Maybe you do like us and you don't all travel together for all of your trips, or maybe you do a combination and you find what works. That's the glory of homeschooling and part-time world schooling, all of these things. You get to decide. You get to decide what works for you and have at it, right? Go ham.
Yeah. We also do not all travel together. We went years ago. So we live in Charleston now, but years ago we were here for a business trip for my husband, and we went to the Yorktown. So you can buy a ticket to go to Fort Sumter, where the Civil War began, and then the Yorktown, which is a retired aircraft carrier. And we did both of those things, and he was okay for the first little bit, but my husband is not a museum guy. He's not an audio tour guy. He's not a history lover. And I have raised our kids primarily my way because I spend more time with them because of his work schedule. My kids do love a good audio tour. They do love a good museum. They like to read all the plaques. They like to sit and immerse themselves in a museum because that's how they've been raised. And so we did the audio tour on the Yorktown, and you could tell he was really trying, like, I am in for this quality family time experience. And then every floor the audio tour started on the lowest deck of the aircraft carrier and kept working its way up. And you could tell with every floor, he was like, oh, there's another floor. And then like, then I think he thought we were finally done. We get up to the very top. He sees daylight again. He's thinking, oh, thank God, I barely survived this. Not realizing that the deck of the aircraft carrier, of course, is also, and there were multiple planes up there. So then every plane had its own thing. And the kids loved it, you know? And I just remember him being like, I think I might throw myself in the water. Like that was the look on his face, you know? And so it's hilarious because sometimes I'll be planning a trip and he'll be like, oh, you're going to be gone for a while. I go, you're welcome to come. I'm just letting you know, it's going to be the Yorktown for about a week and a half. And he's like, oh, I'm out. Forget that. You know, he has zero interest. He's a workaholic. He's happy to work. He's happy to do his thing. I'm happy to travel with the kids in homeschool. So it works out pretty well.
Okay. So, like one thing we haven't talked about yet is the importance of spontaneity, right? And like not only as a life skill, but also the importance of it for world schooling and this idea of being able to let go when something doesn't work out the way that you wanted it to, or being able to jump in to something you hadn't thought about. So we did talk earlier about being open and, you know, like, oh, well, that's a random museum. Like, let's go check that out. Or I hadn't thought about that, but let's give that a try. The flip side of that is when things really don't go well. In a previous episode, Meagan had shared about trying to go to a museum and like it was closed and how it just like it all went to hell in a handbasket because like it just did not go right. We had, well, I often talk about personally as an individual, I learned to let go of things in my 20s. I was living in South Korea and I wanted to take the train to somewhere. I don't even remember where I wanted to go. So I went to the train station by myself and I intended to take the train. And all of the signage was in the Korean alphabet. And I was not prepared for it to all be in the Korean alphabet. I knew where I needed to go, generally speaking, in the times, but I had looked it up in, you know, the Roman alphabet. And so I missed the first train. And then I'm like, okay. And so I went and I got some help and I like muddled through and I thought I knew what I was doing. And I went to go and then I missed the second train. And, you know, I went in and I got a snack and I got some popcorn and I waited for the third train that was supposed to get me there. And there was some kind of a snafu and I was on the wrong platform and something, and I missed the third train. And after about 5 hours, it was clear that I wasn't going to be able to get where I wanted to go and get back in time to make this happen. And so, you know, it was, for me, it was a real epiphany moment of like, look, I chose to come to this country that doesn't speak English, right? It's not their national language. I chose to come here. I chose to embrace this. I chose to do this and it didn't work out, but that's on me. And, you know, I got some great people watching in and I have an idea of what I have an idea of what I'll do differently the next time I decide to try this, you know, like maybe I'll take the bus. I can buy the ticket ahead of time, you know, but just that realization of, you know, it doesn't always go the way you want. And you have an extreme example of that.
Well, that winds down our discussion of world schooling for the day. But before we leave you, we have a few parting words. So here we go.
Recommended resources. Do you need more homeschool supplies? No. Are you going to want these anyway? Absolutely.
So today we are going to stick with the theme and the topic. I have found a travel journal, a field trip travel journal that I think is actually really great. So I randomly stumbled on this at a conference that I went to, and this specific field trip journal is what it's called. They have it in 3 levels. So you can get the Explore level, which is designed for grades 1 to 4, the Navigator level, which is for grades 3 to 7, and the Voyager level, which is grades 7 to 12. And I just think it's a great journal. It's nice. It's got clean lines. But one of the things that it does really well is uses all kinds of different things. So it might ask, depending on the level, it might ask what the weather was like that day. or what you ate that day. And it's all of these things that help tie together and really cement the memory of the field trip in your child's brain, so that it's not so like, well, we went to this place, but I don't, like maybe I kind of, there's a place to draw some pictures along with it. There's a place to practice. Maybe you're practicing your cursive, or you're doing some dictation work with your kid. All of these things are in this actual journal all in one place. So I am a huge, huge, huge fan of getting one before you embark on one of your trips, so that each kind of thing you do, you have one place that you can put it in. And then when you get home, you can print off some pictures and stick them in there as well. And you have kind of this nice little scrapbook that's from your kids, kind of their point of view. And I just think it's really fun. So I think this is a super great journal. It's a little hard to find if you just go Googling it, because it's literally called Field Trip Journal, and then you've got Explorer, Navigator, and Voyager level. But we will put a link in our social media, and there'll be a link for each one of the versions in the podcast as well, in the show notes. So take a look. It's great.
That sounds super fun. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, I like it.
And I will say it was put out by a homeschool mom. That's how I found it. She was speaking at a conference that I went to, and had some there for people to look at. And I was like, oh, this one is actually really good. I'd been through a few and I just wasn't crazy about them. And I love all of the different ways that this is used as a resource and how it helps kids. So support a homeschool mom.
I like that.
And support us with our affiliate link. Win-win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Win-win for sure. All right. Well, let's leave everyone with a mantra for the day. And we will end with, whether you are crossing oceans or your home state, the world has plenty to teach. Sometimes all it takes is a backpack and a little curiosity. Just remember, world schooling doesn't always require a passport, but it typically requires snacks.
Yes.
So enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Happy homeschooling.
Yeah. Have a great one.